Thank you,
Thank you,
snowboarding.
snowboarding.
Hey friends, it's Thank You Snowboarding, the podcast that is diving into UK snowboard culture, where it's from to where it's at. My name is Chris Cracknell. I am doing this in association with the Snowboard Asylum and the Reason magazine, both of which are looking after snowboarders in very fine fashion. So if you need some snowboarding kit, go check them out. And if you need something to read, go check out the Reason magazine. So this week I'm back home after what can only be described as a brilliant week at the Laax Open last week. Got to send a massive shout out to the Reason Mag for having me with them over there, to Astrid and all the crew as part of the Laax Open. Shout out to episode 7's Tom Kingsnorth for making me laugh all week. Bumped into episode 1's Ed Lee, but he was working really, really hard. Shout out to him and Tim Warwood. Basically the two hardest working people there all week, as well as Henry Jackson, who was commentating live. Those guys really put in the hours. I'm surprised if they can actually speak or feel their throats now, because they did a great job of translating what was going on the mountain to those people viewing either on the mountain or on the live stream. So yeah, I'm going to have a bit more of a deep dive into the Laax Open at the end of this episode. But firstly, we're going to get into somebody who I didn't know she was going to be there, and it was a surprise when somebody mentioned her name and said that she was there, and then I bumped into her first thing the next morning. I'm, of course, talking about Lesley Mckenna, who, for those listeners who don't know who she is, she came from a skiing background, grew up in Aviemore, and sort of quickly became to dominate UK competition scene. Her and Melanie Leando went on to do a lot of international contests. I think Lesley herself did 3 Olympics. Some of that has already been gone into in our chat on episode 2 with Melanie Leando, so you can always go and check that out. But Lesley's kind of carried on her career in snowboarding, really. I think she does splitboarding workshops up in Aviemore. She's just released a little short film with Patagonia called Thrawn. She is also part of the sort of Team GB kind of development of all the coaching and training. I think it's fair to say that she's had a massive influence in our young athletes and them doing really, really well. So of course it made sense to speak to Lesley. She has, in one way or another, devoted her life to snowboarding, and snowboarding's given her so much. So of course it seemed like a good person to get on. And I've known Lesley for quite a long time, and I find her very easy company. She's clever, insightful, interested in stuff. And we kick off the conversation with her and the PhD, which within a few minutes of seeing her, she was telling me about, which is fascinating. And I've had a few thoughts since then, which I fired over last night. So I'm kind of hoping that some even more interesting stuff might come out of her PhD. But anyway, I wouldn't like to claim that I'm doing anything for it other than I had an idea, because that is literally all it was. Anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation with her. We did it after riding one day in the apartment at Les Arts in Laax, and yeah, it was really cool. And then we went shortly after this to a chat about women in snowboarding with Donna Carpenter, which was fascinating, really. And Lesley certainly had some insights into that as well. So anyway, here we go. Lesley Mckenna. First things first, tell me about your PhD.
PhD. Whoever thought? I never thought I'd ever do a PhD.
Why are you doing a PhD?
Good question.
Are you someone who just likes to do stuff, always be busy? You strike me as that kind of person.
I kind of fall into things, to be honest. Like, for somebody who, like, most of my colleagues who are working in high performance sport would define themselves as goal orientated.
Right.
And I'm really surprised when I say, I just, get interested in something, and then an opportunity comes up or a door opens and I think that looks wicked fun, or that's super interesting, I'm gonna have a look some more, or take up the offer, take up the opportunity, and it leads somewhere else, and it leads somewhere else.
Yeah.
And, years later, I've gone down this path without really much planning. But within that, once I see an opportunity or get interested in something, then I will set my mind to doing it.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a mix there. So the PhD is one of those themes, kind of like how snowboarding was. And I got interested in how experiences in action sports specifically shape the way that you look at the world, and what that means for what you do at an individual level, but also how the culture develops and how communities work, and the balance between nature and nurture, I guess, a little bit.
Yep.
But specifically in the kind of high performance action sports, if you can even call that a thing. I mean, that sounds like it's an oxymoron, right? But having spent my life, in snowboarding, or my adult life in snowboarding at the high level, and now as a job, I'm a coach developer, so I support coaches in other sports, and that's definitely working in what would be called the high performance sports system.
Yeah.
And there's something really special about action sports. There's something really unique about the experiences that people have, and the communities we have, and the way people support one another, and how stoked everybody is on, what's going on, that I don't always see in other sports. So I wanted to understand more about that. That's what the PhD is about.
Yeah, I've often wondered if the high level of snowboarding, whether it is just sort of morphing into what other sports look like at that level. Do you know what I mean? Because it used to be like, a bit like a party circuit, and it was big events, and snowboarding culture was thick in it. Whereas I was wondering, and coming here, it's quite interesting to see how the culture still is the culture.
Yeah. So I think you can look at the culture and the lifestyle from the outside in, and you can look at it from the perspective of the riders and the coaches who are doing the events, and look out, or, a bit of both. And, I think from the outside in, it would definitely look like snowboarding, or I'm also talking to skateboarders and surfers, that it's morphing, as you say, into what it looks like in more traditional sports like track and field or swimming or gymnastics. But actually it's very, very different.
Is it still?
It's very different. The way people work, the things that people value and talk about, their reasons for doing what they do are quite, and they, when you ask people, they're different. Yeah. It's unique. And the risk that, especially in snowboarding, that's there all the time, and having to manage that risk, take on things, help each other out, I think that lends itself to unique experiences. However, there are structures, if you like, or funding that's come in, and organisation that starts to look a lot more like other high performance sports. So understanding more about how those things, the organisations and rules and structures impact on the cultures and experiences, something that we as action sports communities need to know more about, because we don't want to lose what's special about our sports, right?
Does snowboarding give to other disciplines, like in the way that is it fair to say like you sort of created the whole coaching sort of scheme around like the high performance UK snowboarders?
So it definitely wasn't just me.
No.
But I guess I was in the thick of it, if you like. So although it was there from the beginning, really, you talk to Becky Malthouse, and people like Becky and Neil, they're good examples. So even way back, when it was, snowboarding was the new kid on the block as far as sports went, and it was really connected to the music scene, things like MTV Snowball, when MTV was about music. And Bex and Neil came in, and I imagine, I'm sure you can get to talk to them somewhere about that, but they were quite focused. They trained, they were trying to get better, they were taking on snowboarding as the riders here do today, whilst the outside culture, from the outside in, was very much about the vibrancy and the music scene and the fashion, and the creativity is a big theme, obviously, in snowboarding. And we just have a more evolved picture of exactly the same thing now. So people who are doing it are still trying to do the best that they can do in snowboarding, whether they're riding slopestyle or pipe or big air. They're still practicing and trying to, learn new tricks and being inspired by other people. I had a little chat to a few of the riders today, and they are still having fun, but still pushing their limits, still getting stoked on helping their friend, even if their friend's a competitor from a different country, to push their limits. And that's all still there. I just so as far as I took my experiences from the inside out, but my understanding of the marketing side and the work that myself and Melanie did, we learned so much. I know you've had a great chat with Melanie. Hi, Mel. The stuff that we learned having to do it ourselves about marketing and about coaching and about how it all works really helped me to, when I was then in a program management position working with head coaches, to go, okay, what's important? What's important from the inside out and what's important from the outside in, and try and get that blend. And that's really the role I played in setting up the coaching side.
So I guess from a lot of your experience, it gave you a lot of, because you were saying how sort of high-level performance, like high-level athletes, everything's done for them now, so they have less sort of confidence and sort of ability to sort of go out and push themselves into other things, or they're sort of quite insulated in a way in what they're doing.
I think there is a danger, and quite a few of the coaches that I've spoken to as part of the PhD have mentioned this, that if you don't support the riders to solve the problems that come along in life in general, how do you get yourself from A to B? What do you do if you're stranded and the train's late? And this is things that happen when you're getting yourself a ride. And if you have somebody sorting all of those things out for you, obviously I'm not talking about kids here, I'm talking about young adults, then you never learn to do it yourself. You never abandon a child. That's not what I'm saying. But to support people to be able to take on life's challenges and coach in a way that helps them to understand how they learn themselves, and to really, it sounds cheesy, but to empower them and to help them have accountability to themselves apart from anything else, but also to those around them, and appreciation and a respect for those they're competing against and working with. I think that's important, and there's a danger if everything's too structured and too organised that goes. And
because you guys just DIY'd the whole thing, didn't you, essentially?
Yeah, we did, and would I recommend that as an approach? I had an amazing time. I learned so many amazing, important things, and I wouldn't change that for the world. So maybe I shouldn't be endorsing that approach. However, there is some lessons in there that maybe you can support other people to learn, maybe in not such a harsh way, or a bit quicker.
For sure. Don't have to make all the mistakes yourself, right? You can learn from others. Exactly. All right, cool. Let's go back in time then. How did you find snowboarding? Like, what did it look like when you first discovered it?
Tony Brown flying down the Coicas out of control, whooping and hollering, I guess. But Tony, there's a person you should definitely talk to.
He's on the list.
So Tony was a good friend of my older cousins. I obviously was really lucky to grow up in Aviemore. Yeah. And both my parents had connections to Cairngorm Mountain. My dad, first of all, was a ski patroller and then drove the cats. Yeah. And my mum was a PE teacher, but also ski instructed a little bit. So as part of the local ski club, I got loads of support. I got really cheap, sometimes free lift passes. The local shops supported the kids in the club. The local community really mucked in so that all the local kids could get up the mountain. And it's still like that in Cairngorm. It's this really special place. So you have a real melting pot of people being able to learn to ski when they're a kid. So I was just part of that local group of kids.
How did you transition from skiing
to snowboarding?
Yeah.
So by the late 80s, my older cousins who very much were part of Tony Brown's crew. Aviemore was quite a small place. Snowboarding was visible, and I got to, chat to Tony especially, just because we were all part of the same community. And
he had the Snowboard Academy that turned into sort of morphed into the Snowboard Asylum over time.
Exactly that. And I first tried snowboarding, I must have been about 12. And me and my older cousin Alan Baxter borrowed a couple of snowboards, hard boots, on our Salmon ski boots. I think it must have been too windy for Cairngorm Ski Club to run or something, so it was probably horrendous. It's probably like 70 mile an hour crosswinds, and we took these snowboards up the Corrie Cass on the sheet ice and gave it a shot, and it was awful. And we both were like battered and bruised. We tumbled our way down the hill, but we had a great time, and we were like, oh yeah, that was really difficult.
Do you remember what boards they
were? Some Burton Airs, probably. I don't, whatever. This was 1988, 89, sometime about then. You have to ask Tony, he might remember.
Okay.
And from that point on, I had full respect for anybody that was snowboarding, because I thought it was quite difficult. You can just jump on and do it.
Did you not just sort of think, hang on, no, that's not giving me the same things I get from skis, so I'm going to jack it?
Oh, we just loved, we loved skiing. We loved anything up that mountain.
Yeah.
By going up that mountain, if you were a kid from Aviemore in whatever club you were in, it was like paradise, because you got to a whole playground to go and razz about on, and the coaches were all, looking back, it wasn't loose to the point of dangerous, but there was a lot of freedom. You got to learn, you got to make a lot of mistakes, and you got lost, but you didn't really get lost. Somebody always found you again. It was a great upbringing. You learn well, and I was even more lucky, because at the time I was allowed to stay late with my dad when he was pisting, and he'd drive up the White Lady and I'd get out at the top, and he'd piste down with the big spotlight on, and I'd ski down in front. So I got to go cat skiing as well.
That's rad that you got to ride in the cat. I've been in a cat once and I loved it. I was like, these things are incredible.
It was awesome. So by the time I really went snowboarding, I guess more often, I was well into my ski career, because shortly, I got on the Scottish ski team and I trained, raced gates, and all the time Tony was like, you should go snowboarding, whenever I saw him. Thanks, Tony. And then it would have been about 94, 95, and actually Becky gave me a snowboard. One of our nitros with the Sega on it.
Yeah.
I might even still have it in the shed, my mum's shed somewhere.
To find that.
And all the board-wise guys were so supportive. And they're like, you should come snowboarding more, you'd love it. And at that time I was on the British ski team, and there was a lot of politics involved in alpine skiing and not much money. And it was really difficult to try and see my way through that, because my family didn't have the kind of money that I would have needed to have to continue skiing. But I loved being in the mountains, and I didn't really want to not be in the mountains. And then it was a series of, it's kind of sad, like tragedy happened. One of the girls that was on the ski team with me got killed in a downhill skiing accident. This was in 1996, January 96. And we had to all come home, obviously, for her funeral. And it just happened that 1996 was a bumper snow year. So I came back to Aviemore and I was at home for a couple of weeks, and I was like 3 years into being on the ski team, and it was getting quite serious. I was totally broke. I'd been working about 4 jobs all summer to get enough money to ski, and then one of my friends got killed and I was at home, and it's kind of, that's difficult to process in your late teens. And
yeah, totally.
Becky, and I think Neil was there as well, Cy Smith, Justin Westcott, Gus, they were like looking after me, like, forget skiing, just come snowboarding for a few weeks. Yeah. Just clear your head, come and have fun. It was literally powder, if anyone remembers 96 in Cairngorm, for a good few weeks. So I went and razzed about Cairngorm and tumbled my way down all sorts of places I probably had no business being. Now I'm like, oh my God, how did we not get avalanched or something? And by the end of that few weeks, it was actually Justin Westcott that made me a bet, and or a challenge. He said if he could get the same level of support for snowboarding that I had for skiing. So I had some ski sponsors, equipment mostly, and a bit of expenses. Would I jump ship? And I never thought about that. I was like,
that's crazy.
Okay. And Justin and the Boardwise crew, Brian, somehow managed to talk the Burton importers at the time, Simon Richardson,
rest in peace, sadly.
Rest in peace, yeah. That would be a good idea to talk Burton Europe into letting me come and train with their race team.
No way.
Which is just so ridiculous. But the attitude, that can-do attitude, was what got me hooked. It was an opportunity. A door opened. Yeah. And one of my really good friends and ski coach at the time, John Clark, said to me, you're not... I went back out to one ski race, to the Open Cup finals, and he said to me, I'm not letting you get in the bus back home. You need to go snowboarding. I'm not giving you a lift back home from the Alps. And so I went to Marybelle, and I had the opportunity.
British
the Boardwise guys were like, come and sleep on our floor over here. It'll be great fun. And I went to Marybelle. I met Melanie. I had a great time. Loved snowboarding. Everyone was so supportive. Burton gave me some gear and then said, why don't you come to the Burton camp in a few weeks in Countertall? And I literally never looked back.
Then you clear up at that?
Oh, no, definitely. I probably cleared up tumbling down things. I literally, the only thing I could do at that point was rail from edge to edge really, really quickly because I knew how to do that from skis and I wasn't scared. So as long as I was carving, I was totally fine. If it involved trying to speed check at all in any way, it turned into absolute disaster, or I accidentally rodeo flipped out of a rut or a bump. So I spent a lot of time having big crashes. It was a steep learning curve for me.
I got snow blindness at that British chance. I hitched over from Les Arc where I was doing a season, turned up, rode the half pipe, got snow blindness, spent 2 days in a dark room, then went home again.
No.
I don't have fond memories of that British champs, to be fair.
I think I might have done quite well in the border cross. It wasn't, the nice thing as well, it wasn't about winning or beating people. It was about, let's take this on together right from the start. So there was something different about the culture straight from the start.
And what happened? Because you did a season living with all the White Lines crew in Marybelle, is that right?
Yeah, so before I did that, me and Melanie had a tiny little cupboard, almost slightly bigger than a cupboard, that we lived in Saint Foy together.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when we really tried to take on the World Cup tour. We should write a book about that. It's like looking back, I'm like, we did what? And we coach each other. So Melanie was really experienced as a coach and a very good coach. And I had done quite a lot of coaching as well. I had been coaching some kids to make money in order to ski. So we worked it out. We were really strategic as well as having fun. We're like, right, okay, we need to do this and we need to do this. And we went up every day and we'd practice and, we'd set courses and we'd both ride the courses and then we'd go to the pipe and I'd try and help Melanie do the pipe and then I join in a little bit and she'd join in the race gates. So we did all of that ourselves and organised the trips that we went to events and, persuaded people to put in enough money for our travel expenses and then turned up, got to know somebody and said, I happen to have a sofa bed that we could sleep on for a week, do you? Thank you to everyone who put us up and put up with us in those years. If it hadn't have been for the kindness and the openness of everybody involved, that we would never have been able to do what we did. Yeah. So that was the first season. Second season, I lived with the White Lines crew in Marybelle, and Melanie lived in Val d'Isère. So we combined forces and travelled from there. And then we went back to Bourg. We got a house again in Bourg Saint-Maurice after that. So
I slept on your floor one summer.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And it was good to be in Bourg because Teen was still running all year round. And
with half pipes.
Yeah, you could do it fairly cheaply. We still didn't have a huge amount of money, so we made it work. We worked when we could, and we hustled, and we were tried to be professional on terms of. We realised there was interest from brands to sponsor snowboarding, so we had to work out. Well, you have to be accountable for that money. You have to, they're not going to give you money for free. Yeah. There's no free money. So we had to work out what we'd have to do in order to get the money. And I think that was a good mixture. we definitely brought different skill sets and different ways of doing things, collaborated and made it work. Lots of learning there too.
Yeah, for sure. What was it like? You're the first Olympian I've spoken to. What's that like, having to get your shit together to get to the Olymp, like just to sort of qualify and to get there, and then once you're actually there, deal with being there and performing?
I mean, even just to get there and to work out the strategy to open the quota spots is a full-on mission. Like, you have to be really tactical as well as good enough to do it. So before Salt Lake, there were only 20 spots for women's halfpipe, so you had to be in the top 20 in the world. But to be in the top 20 in the world, you really needed 2 top 5 results.
Right.
And we'd worked that out. We knew how difficult it was going to be. And we'd both had top 5 results at that point. So we were like, this is a long shot, but it's possible. And unfortunately, Melanie had a really bad head injury.
Yeah.
Like
she mentioned that. I didn't know about that.
So at the Brit Games before the qualification period for Olympics. So that head injury put Melanie out of the run-ins, unfortunately. And that's really, looking back, that's really sad on so many levels, because it would have been far more fun if we'd both been able to go. It was a very lonely place to be at the Olympics as the first British person with no teammates.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought about what kind of spotlight is on you at Olympics.
Yeah,
It's been such a mission to get, somehow managed to get there, got the quota spot, turned up at the Olympics. And I'd been starting to ride quite well by that point. I'd quit Alpine. I got bored going round gates. At one point, I did everything. I couldn't get enough. I was like racing, and then I'd jump into the board across and do that, and then I'd go on the pipe. I have no idea how I had the energy to do that. It was absolutely crazy, the first 2 seasons on this World Cup tour. I remember in a World Cup in Whistler, I was riding the pipe practice, and I race trained with a French team, and one of the team who hadn't qualified for the next round of the GS came whizzing up going, "You're in the finals, you need to go." And I was like, oh my God. So I had to quickly put on my race stuff. I didn't have time to put my catsuit back on and go do the finals in my half-pipe gear. So anyway, by the time I got to the Olympics, I'd competed in a Grand Prix. This was in 2002. And just in the December of 2001, I'd done really well in one of the Grand Prix at Mammoth. I think I was 3rd. I managed to wing a McTwist to frontside 5, so that was the level at the time.
Could do a Mickey. Can you still do a Mickey? I asked my brother that on his one.
If it's really soft, if it's quite, I reckon I could wing it. I wouldn't try unless it was really soft, in case it went wrong. Anyway, the Canadian TV lot tipped me as an outside chance for a medal, and from then on, I just froze. I hadn't processed any of that. I was used to being the complete outsider, just managing to get there somehow and find a floor to sleep on and doing my best. To all of a sudden there was this other narrative about winning and how are you going to win. And I thought, what? I just want to go as big as I can. And like, wow, this is awesome. So that was difficult. And I'd also had hurt my shoulder a few weeks before and literally couldn't lift my arm up until about the week before Olympics. So I was a bit like rabbit in the headlights by the time that Olympics came round, unfortunately. But it was an awesome experience.
Right.
Snowboarding really came of age during that event, and you could see that the pipe was perfect. We turned up and we were all looking at each other going, oh my God, we've never seen anything like this.
No, because the perfect pipes weren't that common, were they?
No, they were
like,
really
not many people
common.
knew how to build
I
them.
think that's the first perfect pipe I'd ever seen, and everyone else too.
Yeah.
And I can remember talking to the people at the time, people like Trevor Andrews or Hecky Sorsa or Kirsty and Stina, going, this is amazing. This is like perfect. So everyone was amped and just throwing it, sending it as much as they could. So being there for the riding was brilliant. The crowd were brilliant. But I realised that, there was a mainstream sports media and a mainstream the British Olympic Association at the time were quite old-fashioned. They definitely didn't understand snowboarding.
No.
And I was having to mediate the whole time, and that was really difficult. So that became a theme throughout my professional career,
Right.
like the bridge between what really happens and why people do action sports, and the awesomeness of it when it all comes together and the conditions are perfect and people are bouncing off of one another and you see magic happening.
Yeah.
And then how do you plan winning that's dry and ordered and linear and there's no room for magic.
No.
So,
And that's
there's
what
a
the
real
public
balance
watching
there.
at home want. They want to see someone get a medal, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they do. I think they pick up also on that showmanship and the magic and the people inspiring one another. And, the snowboarding at the last Olympics had the highest viewing figures. And, of course, it's competitive. But if you don't enter a competition if you don't like to take other people on and do your best.
Yeah.
And all the, for my PhD, I'm asking those questions. And of course, everybody who's at a World Cup, if they're at the level, is up for trying to win the competition or at least do their best tricks. But it's about more than that. It's not only about that.
Do you think the mainstream understand that? I remember Claire Balding being quite dismissive of snowboarding when they first showed it, whatever Olympics it was. She was a bit like, oh, and here's this thing, snowboarding, and it's just some people falling over. I just remember thinking, you prick, you don't understand this at all. And then watching that Sports Personality of the Year, which isn't a programme I would particularly watch, but I heard that Mia won it, or like the young sports personality, so I decided to watch it. And her walking up there in a pair of Vans, walking past Claire Balding, I just remember thinking, fuck you, Claire.
Is it changing? I'd like to think it is. I'd like to think that there's more room for understanding of different approaches to why things matter, and especially from the sporting side. I often throw this question into high performance sports spaces. What's the value and relevance of high performance in sport today? Why does it matter?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, it's extremely frivolous. But it's very, it's a special thing as well. And if you watch people like Valentino Giselli here doing his magic in the halfpipe and doing stuff that nobody else has ever done before ever. And how did he get there? How's that possible? What elements have come together to support this amazing person to reach that potential? And the performance is special, but everything that goes into it and makes it possible is really valuable and can be transferred into other parts of life. That's why it's valuable.
So I was just wondering about, obviously talking about high performance, but what is it that the public see that makes them want to go snowboarding? Is it the high level, people riding the pipe at the top level, which to be honest is insane, but unattainable. It's kind of not, it's not like back in the 90s where it's like, maybe I could learn to do a 6 foot method. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And probably lots of people could. Whereas now it's like, I look to that pipe when I look at that pipe up there and just think, I don't even want to go anywhere near it. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't even want to cruise up and down it. It's terrifying.
Pretty gnarly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there's a few things. I think the real general public who don't do snow sports or know nothing about it are tuning into the performative side. It's a bit like a circus act. It looks crazy. And certainly, I think Boardacross gets a lot of views as well. There's excitement. Right. It's vibrant. I think the more freestyle events, it's a show, but I guess they pick up on the vibe and the interactions between the athletes. And I think one of the key moments from the Beijing Olympics was when Zoe from the New Zealand female slopestyle rider, when she won with her last run in the slopestyle, all the other women came out and were hugging her and were like genuinely stoked. And that's a really special thing and not something you see in many other sports. Yeah,
I'm glad. I would say that maybe it does influence other sports in that way, because I think people are acting more like that in other sports. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's because sort of snowboarding and skating it's more of a community. Everyone wants snowboarding to do well as
as themselves.
Yeah. It's almost as important.
Yeah.
Okay. I've lost the thread. So let's get away from competition and back to you. Because that thing that you've just made with Patagonia.
Thrawn film.
Thrawn.
Yeah.
My kids were disappointed because there's a Thrawn in Star Wars.
I know.
And I was talking about them, and they
a
were
lot of
like,
people
I was like, you should watch this. And they're like,
pointed
that's not Thrawn. He's the blue guy in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, you've devoted your life now to snowboarding, haven't you? And you live it. You do live the life.
I do. I didn't purposely devote my life to snowboarding. In my head, I'm still taking a year out. I guess I've gone back to uni now. I'm not taking a year out. You know, when I left school after my hires.
What did you have any idea what you wanted to like? Did you have a this is what I might do?
No, because I was lucky. I was fairly good at passing exams, so I managed to get 5 hires, and they were all A's. And the teachers were like, "You need to do a doctor or a lawyer." And I'm like, oh God. So I applied for 5 different things at 5 different universities. That's how much I knew what I wanted to do. And I think I got 3 different offers and deferred all of them, didn't accept any, and went skiing. And lucky enough, my first season skiing, I was in Jackson Hole living with Ski Patrol because my parents had friends that used to, actually the guy was a Scottish guy, Callum Mackay, legend, that was on the Ski Patrol in Jackson, and he kindly looked after me. I was part of his family for the season and skied for the Jackson Hole Ski Club, who were awesome. Big shout out to Jackson Hole Ski Patrol and Jackson Hole Ski Club. And so I never went back. I deferred, I think, a few times, and then the universities said, you're taking the mick. You can't defer again. Come back when you actually know what you want to do. And followed those threads, just doors opened. I ended up snowboarding, and I went back to study when I was the Roxy team manager, and I was coaching and managing riding a bit at the same time, and I went back to do a master's in performance coaching. And that's when I was talking to Hamish McKnight and Pat Sharples a lot about the coaching structure in the UK. Okay.
You also just mentioned the Roxy team manager thing. You also made some videos, didn't you?
Yes. So Thrawn kind of started as a mini project. You asked about Thrawn. And it was going to be just a few minutes long and a bit of a, how do you connect into the land and Cairngorman? What's the culture like? What's the community like? And we talked about these themes, and they've been developing over a few years. Whenever we went split boarding, especially over COVID, we did a lot of split boarding. Yeah. Me and Hannah and Lauren and all our little local crew, whoever we were with. And we started to talk more about what was valuable in the community and how people were really able to mend and make do and make the most of things. And you know, there's always challenges and things are always political and there's never enough money or resources, but there's always a way. And if you can stick together and work together and value different opinions and agree to disagree, and then you can get somewhere. So we started to build the story, and then we found my granddad's old cine footage, and we're like, that's really nice. And Hannah was like, we need to use this. And then Hannah and Rachel, one of the filmers on the Thrawn project, watched the Chunky Knit films again, and they're like, this is amazing. We need to do something with this. And it kind of organically came together. So this is just, there's just something I've got to get into at this point. In the Chunky Knit movies, you are the possessor of possibly the worst injury committed to film. That wasn't a nice injury. I broke my jaw with my knee on my chin on a tiny little wind lip. Yeah. But you didn't just break your jaw, you sort of split your lip there. And that is, I mean, I nearly threw up when I saw that. It was pretty mean. I mean, that is a gnarly injury. Yeah. Is that all fixed up and fine? Yeah, it's all fine. You got a decent scar going? Got me a scar down there, and yeah, I got some free plastic surgery. I never recommend plastic surgery to anybody. When somebody says to me that they want plastic surgery, I think, you really don't. I've had it. You really don't. But Chunky Knit was a project that I set up with Josie McNamara, She used to be Josie Clyde. And Josie grew up in Aviemore as well. And she grew up in that same Cairngorm Ski Club vibe. And we really wanted to capture what happens when people do things together and support each other.
Yeah.
And we felt the women who were snowboarding at the time, they came together and supported each other and took it on and did it for themselves. They were going to learn from each other and it would progress. And it was really the start of the women's side of snowboarding progressing.
Yeah.
And I think us, along with runway films and mischief films that came out of that, there was a few projects in North America, and Chunky Knit Films did 3 films in Europe, and we kind of worked or knew each other and talked a lot, and I think that was a really important time. So now 20 years since we first released Drop Stitch, to have a second generation of younger women coming along and going, this is amazing, this is awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool. And I think it was nice and thrown to throw a nod in that direction. And the women who were riding in it were amazing. Such for the time, great shots. I'd kind of forgotten.
Yeah, and the Thrawn thing really sort of it really sort of sums up like a homegrown sort of culture that I think is quite unique. I mean, I'll say the UK, but really it's Scotland, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like we're sort of riding on your coattails a bit with that, because it's definitely a Scottish thing, I think.
Yeah. I think it's quite particular.
Or it's of a place, and that place happens to be the Highlands.
It definitely mixes like Highland culture that are like Highlanders, and even I was born in Inverness, and I still feel like I'm not really a Highlander. There's my friends whose families have been there for hundreds, thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's such a harsh climate up there, always has been harsh. To be able to survive and thrive, you need to be thrawn. You need to be able to know what matters and when it matters. And there's that strategy and creativity again, the structure and the order and the chaos and the free-flowingness, and you need both.
Yeah.
And you need to stick with it. You need to be able to put up with the ups and the downs. And I think that's what Thrawn captures, but positions it to give a really important message, especially around the climate crisis. We've got big challenges to solve. So we're going to need all the ways of looking at the world, and we're going to need to work together. We're going to need to make the best of what we've got in order to be able to get stuff done.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the, I guess, higher order message of Thrawn.
And with all this, all the things that you've done and all the things you've achieved and all the sort of the positions that you've held and the sort of elements of snowboarding that you've sort of gone into that most people won't, what is it about snowboarding that keeps you wanting to go snowboarding?
It's just so fun to do. It's fun to do, but it also helps me understand myself. So it helps me connect to myself. It's challenging. You can keep learning. You can interpret the landscape. You interact with the landscape. Sometimes you even feel immersed or at one with nature. But it's also a really social thing too. You can learn with your crew or whoever you're riding with. You can help each other out. You can see the world through their eyes in a different way. You can literally just sliding about puts a smile on your face, if that's at a simple level.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I ended up back in Aviemore. I never thought I'd end up living back there.
Yeah, of all the places you've been, you could have settled in many places, and to kind of, it seems, I don't know. There's definitely a reason why you're back there.
Yeah. So the community is amazing and the people are amazing, but the land is, the mountains are just great, and I can pop up the hill at lunchtime if I'm working. I can pop up for an hour, a couple of hours, have a slide, come back to work.
You've got children. Have you got children?
I've got a 9-year-old daughter.
A 9-year-old. I have a 9-year-old daughter too. What is it like taking her up the mountain?
I love it. I love to, see the world through her eyes. And she can ski and snowboard, and she picks and chooses, and that's great.
Do you put any pressure on?
I try not to.
But you do.
No. Like, It's interesting, I think skiing, and somebody I interviewed in the last few days here at this event, who's been doing events for a very long time, said, apparently, I need to go and research this, that there is research from the neurology perspective that says sports where you go sideways change the way your brain works, the way your brain, he mentioned specifically the way your brain has an uptake of dopamine. I'm not sure if that's entirely the case, but something about going sideways does affect the way you look at the world. And skiing's great too, but I think Cora says to me, in her words, snowboarding is just slightly more fun. Skiing is a fun thing to do, but snowboarding is fun.
Right.
Now, what is that? That's interesting.
That is interesting. That is interesting. I find that quite fascinating that standing sideways is gives you a different thing. Because I used to ski, and I definitely, I'd hit jumps and stuff like that. It's definitely better on a snowboard. Yeah. But I don't know why it's better, but it definitely feels better, and you can't really explain that to people. It just feels, it's got a feeling.
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling, and I think I love that feeling as much now. I came to snowboarding really, quite late in life. I obviously tried it when I was reasonably young, but I didn't really learn to do it until my early 20s.
Yeah, which is crazy now, considering like Mia and Emily.
Yeah, Rothney, Emily Rothney's, she's from Aviemore and grew up snowboarding there. I wish I'd maybe learned it earlier, but I'm just really glad that I learned it.
So there you go. 45 minutes in the company of the lovely Lesley Mckenna. Thanks, Lesley, for sparing a bit of time in what was a busy week, I think, for everyone. Even I managed to actually be quite busy among all the snowboarding and the socialising, of which there was a lot of both. I want to send a shout out to Duncan Wright, Robin, Patrick, Cool Bus Rob, Tom Kingsnorth, basically every Joy from the Reason Mag, everyone that basically we went snowboarding with and had plenty of laughs with. I do appreciate you having me along and basically welcoming me back to the mountains after what's been 6 years, I think. It was great to be back. I think I described it as the warm embrace of the mountains. As Melanie said on her episode, there's something about being in the mountains, they sort of feel like they hold you, and that's a feeling I haven't had for a long time, and I was very happy to have that back. So yeah, hopefully certainly not going to leave it another 5 years. And it's great to be chatting with people out there, talking to them about the podcast. Lots of people had heard about it. People were really stoked on the fact that we're sort of keeping this history going. And it was great. It was an all-round kind of good for the soul trip, as well as seeing insane snowboarding at the highest level. And that sort of brings me on to one of the things I was wondering about is whether sort of these competition kids are just kind of automatons and able to throw it down, but without any personality. And I would say that snowboarding is definitely alive and well in amongst all this lot. I'd say especially Valentino Giseli. I mean, he absolutely kicks it on the mountain, but he was also on stage with MOP on Saturday night. His dad's a loose cannon as well. I think Ed described him looser than a rental bowling shoe. And I'd say that's the case. And there's lots of people there. And basically, the spirit of snowboarding in the next generation is definitely alive. Maybe it's more alive than ever due to the fact that all their coaches, like the US team coach is Danny Cass. And if you don't know about Danny Cass, go and have a look at some of the old Grenade movies and you'll see that, he used to run around firing fireworks at people and getting up to all sorts. So it's definitely a case of maybe it is the coaches are imparting that spirit into their younger riders, and the younger riders are definitely on it. I've saw so many stylish things. I saw a guy, it might have been Rene Rajakangas, do this like tail slide to front sort of 270 melon off the big rail in the park. And man, it just looks so good. And I saw Mia Brooks do like a frontside 3 lean over the little volcano, just popped one over and just dripping with style. So, yeah, snowboarding is in very good health. I stuck a picture up on the Instagram. If you follow the Instagram Thank You Snowboarding podcast, I put a clip up there, just happened to catch I don't know who the rider is, just throwing down the biggest McTwist I think I've ever seen, just in practice. And yeah, man, snowboarding it's still as insane, and you can kind of see the lineage through the early days to where it is now, and that is great to see. So yeah, Laax was interesting. After this interview, as I said, we went off to see to hear Donna Carpenter, a friend of ours called Alba, and I can't remember who the other girl was, talking about women in snowboarding, and that was kind of an interesting thing. I'd like to think that snowboarding is kind of leading the way in sort of gender parity and everything like that, and it was good to hear what Donna Carpenter. I mean, I listened to her episode on the bomb hole, which is a really good episode. I think she's quite a fascinating person. She's still very opinionated and still sounds like it, working hard to sort of achieve lots of things in snowboarding. So it was great to actually sort of see her in person and hear her speak. Quite inspirational. What else went down? MOP, the old hip hop crew, played on a Saturday night, and that was hilarious. I was hanging out with Tom Kingsnorth for that, and that was, oh man, I just laughed so much. I had a big smile on my face all week, I think. It was truly a great experience. So yeah, that was Laax. Hopefully going up to the Highlands with the Snowboard Asylum crew for to see Lesley and Johnny Barr and the whole Upbattle thing in March, and maybe back out for the spring break in the Alps at the end of April, but we shall see. I'll keep you posted. Just mentioned the Instagram. The Instagram is growing and growing all the time, getting loads of, trying to find some really interesting content to throw up there. Like, for instance, yesterday I put up a thing about dry slope that Ski Sunday did a few years back with Tim Warwood and Jamie Nichols. And that's just a kind of a nice little celebration of our scene, really. It still is the UK dry slope. Still is the dry slope that I would say is the backbone of the culture in the UK. There's not as many dry slopes as there used to be. I think we've covered that with a few people. But there are still scenes, and if you are in one of those scenes, big shout out to you. If you're still riding dry slope, then more power to you, because it's dangerous, it's dirty, it wrecks your equipment, but it is the most accessible way, the cheapest way of getting on a snowboard in the UK. So if you are still at it, or you're thinking about getting into it, then definitely give it a go. Most people I know started out on dry slope, and everyone has fond memories. You know what they say, bones heal. I'm not going to do the rest of it in fear of getting cancelled. Pain is temporary, glory is forever. I think that's the end of that phrase. So yeah. If you are listening to this, wondering if you want to get into snowboarding, then do go out and find your local dry slope and see what they offer. It will be a good way of getting into it, and you'll probably meet some people who are 100% dedicated to getting you going and sharing the stoke with you. So there's that. Right, the music at the top of the podcast this week, let's not forget that, is by, just having to look at my Shazam here. It is by QMS. It's by T-Love. It's called QMS. It's out on Ninja Tune. And it featured in Lesley's movie Drop Stitch, made by Chunky Knit Productions. I thought we'd mind that, and I'll put us up on our YouTube channel. Thank You Snowboarding on YouTube. If you go and have a look at that, that'll be on top of the playlist. And that song's in it. And I just quite liked a bit of hip hop for once. I don't think we've had much hip hop so far on the series. So yeah, that's that. And yeah, it's a good movie. And we mentioned Lesley's gnarly injury, and that also is in there. But please do keep a sick bag or a bowl nearby, because it will turn your stomach. It is, I would say, possibly the gnarliest snowboard injury I've seen on camera, and it is pretty horrific. Luckily, Lesley's face is completely fine and back to normal and as beautiful as ever. What else is there? We did 4 episodes of the podcast out in Laax. Lesley being one, Rob, Cool Bus Rob, who we put out last week. I hope you enjoyed that. The intro and the outro were probably a little bit loose because I think it's fair to say that we'd had a couple of after beer ridings with Tom Wilmot. But Tom Wilmot, who's the New Zealand coach, he came and did an episode, and I've also got an episode with Mia Brooks's mum and dad. I thought it'd be really interesting to hear their story, and it is an interesting story. And we're going to see how Mia gets on at the X Games, and then maybe we're going to catch up with her as well and sort of put it all together into an episode in a couple of weeks. So keep it locked for that. Want to send a shout out, obviously, to the Snowboard Asylum. They hooked me up with some kit before I went over there because my boots were knackered and I needed a new jacket, and they were very generous. The Jones jacket, which performed amazingly well, a pair of Burton boots, which were some of the lightest, most comfortable boots I've ever used. I busted out the old reissue brushy for a few days. And I have to say, I was wondering about how it might be a bit rubbish, but actually it kind of dealt with all conditions really well. It's a really good board. So it's been on my wall for 5 years, and I think there'll be a whole thing about the brushy. I think I'll do it on Instagram at some point, about what it meant and why I've got it now, because I'm not really a sort of hoarder or collector, but certainly there was something about that board. But I'll tell that story on Instagram, so follow us over there and I'll post something up about that at some point. Yeah, that was a great board. We had all sorts of weather over there. I mean, I've never been to a place where you literally have all the seasons in one run, but I've also never been to a place where the top to bottom runs are so long, and it's like Mario Kart in loads of places. So yeah, Laax is a great resort. If you're looking to get away, if you want to ride some power and you want to ride some park, they're pretty set up for everything. Try and avoid the weekends. Certainly the Saturday was really, really busy. Took quite a while to get out of the town, up the mountain. But the rest of the week, certainly midweek, the place is a ghost town. So, yeah, well worth checking out. Laax is a great place to go snowboarding if you are looking for somewhere to go. But obviously there are many options open to you. I think that's it. I think I've rambled on for quite a long time. If you are listening, if you want to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is you're listening to us, that would be much appreciated. As always, the more people we get listening to this, then the more we can do. And obviously, that's a good thing because there's so many stories. Every time I speak to someone tells me the story of someone else that we need to speak to. So my original list isn't being hit up very much because I keep finding other people and other people's stories to tell, and it's fascinating and really interesting, and I love it. So yeah, please do leave us a review, share it with your friends, do all the social stuff. You know the score. That'd be great. All right, well, I'm out of here till next week. Not sure who we're going to have next week. I've got a few in the bag. We'll see how Mia gets on at the X Games, and that might dictate what happens. But yeah, until then, keep it locked. Thank you, snowboarding. Peace.